in Ukraine. We and allies and partners have been able to provide the Ukrainians to date with about 10 systems for every plane and every tank. But to your point, the nature of the battle is now shifted. And what's happening in the east and southern Ukraine is very different than what was happening around Kyiv in terms of what the Ukrainians need to be able to repel the Russian aggression. And so heavier artillery has been critical, and we're working assiduously, and others are, to get them that. Shore to ship weapons to deal with the challenges in the Black Sea, also vital. Heavier armor, tanks, etc. All of that is in train. Secretary Austin was in Germany yesterday, as you probably saw. A pretty remarkable scene. 40 defense ministers sitting around a huge table, all working on coordinating the effort to get to the Ukrainians what they need. We spent 3 hours with President Zelensky, his Minister of Defense, his Chief of the Armed Forces, the Foreign Minister, et cetera. And a chunk of that time was spent on going in detail through Ukraine's needs going forward. So the short answer is we are determined to get them what they need to deal with this Russian aggression and to push the Russians out of the country. It's another matter as to whether the Ukrainians should take actions that go beyond their borders. My own view is that it's vital that they do whatever is necessary to defend against Russian aggression, and the tactics of this are their decisions. But what we're doing with all of these systems is making sure the Ukrainians have the means to defend themselves. That's what this is about, and making sure that they can do whatever is necessary to push the Russians out of the country.
Mr. Chairman, I won't ask another question, but if I can compliment or at least support a decision that the Secretary has made. I encouraged you several weeks ago, a week or more ago, to return to Kyiv with our diplomatic embassy. You are headed that direction. It sounds like it's going to occur in stages, but I am supportive of the United States having its embassy in Kyiv as quickly as it's safe for our personnel. And I want to thank you for a couple of folks, several of your folks, Naz, Courtney, Paul, Jeff, Consular Affairs folks who have been exceptionally helpful to us in our efforts to solve problems for Kansans and Americans around the globe. Thank you.
Senator, thank you for saying that. We're very much appreciate it, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Secretary Blinken, I had stepped out, but I heard your kind words outside. I didn't jump back in because I didn't want to interrupt you. I was enjoying it too much. But thank you. It was undeserved, but greatly appreciated. And regarding Ukraine, there's been some who've urged the U.S. to liquidate the Russian central bank's nearly, $100 billion, I believe, in foreign exchange reserves that are frozen at the Federal Reserve, to use those funds to help the people of Ukraine. Does the department have that capacity to identify the assets of Russia and other oligarchs? And can they coordinate with the Treasury and Justice Departments in seizing and freezing such assets?
Mr. Chairman, we are working very closely with Treasury and Justice to look at both how we can effectively freeze, but also seize assets. And we have blocking sanctions, as you know, in place against a variety of individuals and institutions that effectively freezes their property in the United States. The question when it comes to the seizure piece is, do we have the relevant provisions in place, civil, criminal, forfeiture authorities? Justice is in the process of reviewing that. And I know that there are a number of ideas that I find compelling about finding ways to use these assets to support Ukraine. The short answer is Justice Department lawyers are looking at all of that.
Of course, it doesn't help that a lot of those assets are behind various walls, one after another, fake corporations and things of that nature.
Yep, and I think it goes to the importance of having transparency, beneficial ownership, rules, et cetera.
I can't think of anything I've seen more shocking than the scenes of what the Russian soldiers are doing, machine gunning families as they're trying to run away from something, the children, innocent civilians who have been murdered. And can that be investigated by the International Criminal Court? Should it be, and can we help?
We welcome the fact that the ICC has opened an investigation. One of the critical things they're doing is making sure that potential evidence of atrocities is being compiled effectively. As I mentioned, I think when you were out of the room, Mr. Chairman, besides the ICC work, I think the critical focus that we have is on supporting the work of the Ukrainian Prosecutor General. And we have experts who are working every single day with that team to make sure that they have what they need to document, compile the evidence, and actually look at potential prosecutions. But those two efforts, as well as the Commission of Inquiry established by the Human Rights Council at the United Nations, with our leadership, are three of the critical vehicles we see going forward to get accountability, to deal with this. And to your point, some of the things we're seeing are, I think, beyond almost our collective imaginations. For example, there are very credible reports that the Russians have been in retreat, booby-trapping things like people's washing machines and toys, so that when people are able to return home and go about their lives, they're killed or injured as a result of one of these booby traps.
I look at some of the landmines and cluster mines they're using in this javelin type mine that you don't even have to touch it, you come near it.
That's exactly right. And Mr. Chairman, part of our request, and I think this will be in the supplemental, will be for some additional funds for demining, because unfortunately we have to deal with that now as a result of what Russia's been doing.
And thank you for mentioning it, because I know your request is 18 million below what been requested last year. I have a feeling you're going to need a lot more for humanitarian demining. And as you know, I've long sought to rid the world of landmines, but I think also what the prosecutors are getting is going to be extremely important for historians. You know, those who don't understand the mistakes of history. It's almost a cliche, but they're condemned to repeat them. The world is going to see this because there is no question that it's crimes against humanity. And we're going to need, I think the World Food Program projects an unmet need of $10 billion. I would hope we'd have requests to beef that up. And the president's budget request is about $8 billion above the fiscal year 2022 enacted level, but war in Ukraine, the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, and so on. Is this not the moment we should be investing more in the State Department and other agencies and more? I know this is something Chairman Coons has talked about at length, putting more in foreign ops, not less. So, and lastly, and my time is running out, the Leahy law, would you and your staff please talk with us how that, the one that prohibits assistance to units of foreign security forces that are committing gross violations of human rights. I think you have some money in your budget for Leahy law vetting, but are you confident that that's being carried out as much as it should be?
Mr. Chairman, in my judgment, it is. I think it's being consistently and effectively applied. We have $15 million in the budget this year to conduct the vetting. It's a critical part of what we do, and I think we have the resources as well as the focus necessary to carry that out in the way it was intended.
And I just mentioned, Chairman, your plane was delayed, but we had a meeting, at some extensive meeting. I know Senator Durbin and I were there yesterday with the president and others about Cuba. Nobody condones the crackdown on the people who are peacefully protesting in there, but I also don't condone the total rollback of the policy that we had under the Obama administration. I had hoped that attention is given to finding a way that we can start having normal relations with Cuba for the good of their own people and for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to catching up with the President. I haven't talked to him since your meeting, but I look forward to hearing from him on the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Graham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I won't request a second round. We'll try to make this as quick as possible, but there's a lot going on in the world, and let's start here at home. Ms. Secretary, do you believe if we repeal Title 42 authority to deport illegal immigrants because of a threat of a COVID outbreak that we will have more illegal immigrants coming?
Senator, two things on that. First, as you know, Title 42 is a CDC authority, public health authority.
Right.
It's not an immigration policy
that's right.
authority. The question is, what practical effect would its repeal have? I think we are likely to see more people seeking to enter the country, but if they cannot present a credible claim of asylum, they'll be returned. That's the policy. That doesn't change. The border's not opening with the repeal of Title 42 if that's what happens.
I'm just saying the border is completely broken. We have 1.2 million illegal crossings since October of last year, and there'll be a tsunami more coming if we repeal Title 42. And will there be COVID money in the supplemental?
I can't speak to that at this point because I think the White House is still looking at that. One way or another, Senator, in my judgment, we need COVID money internationally, whether that's in this supplemental or in some other vehicle, I don't know, but we need it.
Yeah, I think we do need money for COVID internationally. I agree with that. And I think if you want to stop, as Senator Leahy said, one country away from an outbreak, you would revisit Title 42. I would encourage you to do that. Let's go to Afghanistan. What's the state of play in Afghanistan for women right now?
The state of play is extremely mixed to negative.
What's the upside for women?
The only upside that we've seen at all is that, somewhat ironically, you might say there is in the country at large greater stability and relative peace than there's been. That's about the only upside I can think of. The downside, of course, is that we've seen, including most recently, the Taliban fall back on its commitment that it had made to ensure that girls can go to school above the sixth grade. Well, this is, among many things, something that is of deep concern.
Is our homeland more at risk now than it was before the withdrawal in Afghanistan from Al-Qaeda and ISIS presence in Afghanistan?
If you look at the presence and the threat, I'd say there are three things that are going on. First, there is Al-Qaeda itself, and I can go into more detail in a setting, but
it's just a general question. Is Al-Qaeda and ISIS more free to roam now that we're out of Afghanistan than they were before we were left?
ISIS-K is, as you know, is of course an enemy of the Taliban, and the issue there is not the will of the Taliban to take them on; it's their capacity. That is an issue. When it comes to Al-Qaeda and the Arab Al-Qaeda core, there are a very, very small number of people in Afghanistan.
How do we know?
Based on the, again, without going into detail in this setting, I think
Ms. Secretary, with all due respect, if you're a Shiite in Afghanistan, it had been a good week for you. There is no upside to the Taliban charge for a woman anywhere in Afghanistan, and I think our homeland is far more at risk now that we have no presence on the ground, no ability to detect what Al-Qaeda and ISIS-K are up to. So, to me, that's an easy question to ask. President Biden said he had no regrets about leaving Afghanistan. Do you have any regrets?
I don't, Senator, in the sense that This was America's longest war.
No, that's fair enough. Is the war over? Have we ended the war between us and radical
For
Islam
us,
by
it is.
leaving Afghanistan?
We went to Afghanistan, as you know well, for one reason, which is to deal with the folks who attacked us on 9/11. We decimated al-Qaeda and its ability to continue attacks beyond Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden was brought to justice more than a decade ago. It was time to end the longest war.
Have you heard the assessment by the Secretary of Defense and others that how long would it be before an attack against America originating from Afghanistan would mature? And they said 2 years. Is that a successful withdrawal?
Again,
That's what they said. I asked them.
And I don't want to myself put words in their mouths, but the question
anyway,
was how
I just
quickly
think
could
it's
the threat potentially
Yeah,
reconstitute?
well, it's just ridiculous to say that we're safer by letting the Taliban take over Afghanistan and that women have any upside. Let's go to the Ukraine. Are you pursuing Russia being a state sponsor of terrorism?
We're looking at that. And the question is,
What's hard about that?
the question is this, and this is something that the lawyers are looking at. There's no doubt in my mind, Senator, that the Russians are terrorizing the Ukrainian people.
Well, what about
That's
Syria?
The question is this, and again, this is something that that lawyers are looking at to make sure that we actually meet the statutory requirements of that designation. And
Well, if you need to change the law so that Russia fits in, you'll have 100 votes. I don't know what more you'd have to do as a country to be a state sponsor of terrorism. They've decimated the Ukraine, and they're all over Syria, dropping barrel bombs on people. So you mentioned that you're looking at it. I would encourage you to look at it and act upon it. Putin vowed today in the Duma that he would stay committed, even though there have been heavy losses, to accomplishing the goal of the invasion. What would you like to say to him?
very simply, end this aggression, end it now.
Well, it seems not to be working. What are the consequences to him if he keeps this up?
I think we've already seen devastating consequences for Russia. And let me say this. First, in terms of his actual objectives, as stated in his own words, he has already failed, because those objectives were to eliminate Ukraine as an independent and sovereign country, to subsume it back in some fashion into Russia. We know already, as a result of the extraordinary courage of the Ukrainians, that that's not going to happen. And as I've said, there is going to be an independent and sovereign Ukraine around a lot longer than Vladimir Putin will be on the scene. So it's already a strategic
From your
failure.
lips to God's ears, and I want to help you where I can in that endeavor. When it comes to winning in Ukraine, describe very briefly what winning looks like for Ukraine and the United States.
Winning is going to be defined by the Ukrainians, and we will support whatever they decide is in their interest.
Have they told you what winning looks like?
Right now for them, and I don't want to put words in their mouths, but I think their focus is, of course, on repelling the Russian aggression and getting the
You
Russians
said
out
to
of their country.
Senator Moran that our goal was to get Russia out of Ukraine. Is that our goal?
That is Ukraine's goal, and as a result, that's our goal as well.
Okay, great. If Russia uses banned chemical weapons in Ukraine, what will our response be?
The President has been clear that there would be severe consequences for any use of a weapon of mass destruction by Russia. We have been working not only within our government, but with
Can
allies
we
and partners
put
across
a parameter on what severe consequences would look like?
I'm not going to telegraph in public what we can do. I can tell you that a lot of work has gone into planning against every possible scenario. And again, in a different setting, I'm happy to get into
Okay,
that.
we'll take that up. If Russia explodes a tactical nuclear device in Ukraine, would you consider that an attack on NATO? Because the radiation would go well beyond Ukraine.
All of this, including the potential use of a nuclear device, a tactical nuclear device, is part of the planning we're doing. And again, we can get into that in more detail.
Well,
in
just a
setting.
couple more minutes. Do you think our policy regarding Russia and Ukraine has been successful?
To date, in my judgment,
Yeah.
yes, in the sense that we said this, Senator, before, when we saw the likelihood of a Russian aggression many months ago,
So you think this is successful?
I would say two things. First, When we saw this as a possibility, we did two things, and we did both of them at the same time. We worked to see if we could head it off through diplomacy
And that
dialogue,
didn't work.
And that did not work.
Right.
But we also said at the same time that we would make sure that we and the Ukrainians and the world were prepared if Russia went through with its aggression. And we have been. Ukraine has done an extraordinary job in pushing the Russians back from Kyiv. The world has come together to support the Ukrainians as a result of American leadership and American engagement. The world has come together to impose massive consequences on Russia for its aggression, again, as a result
Okay, well,
of
with
our
all due
leadership and
respect,
engagement. So I think in terms of what we set out to do, so far, this has been successful, but it has to be sustained.
I just take issue with the fact that we've been successful in Ukraine. One, they invaded, and we told them not to. They did. They're killing people right and left, and, we're slow getting weapons in. I hope it turns out well. But do you think our withdrawal from Afghanistan affected Putin's decision to invade at all?
I do not. Senator, I think he looks at these things on their own terms.
Why did he pick this year?
Well, when he went into Georgia in 2008, we had more than 150,000 troops between Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah.
That did not deter him. When he went into Ukraine in 2014,
But he hasn't
the first time,
dismembered the state of Georgia. He's occupied, there's two provinces there. But why did he choose to invade Ukraine this year, you believe?
I think a number of factors came into play. I think he saw Ukraine moving inexorably to the West, to Europe, and he saw nothing that was going to interrupt that process. It was democratizing, it was strengthening its system, and having a successful democracy on Russia's borders was bad for Putin, and he had the ambition that he said in his own words
Last year.
Ending its sovereignty and independence, and this was...
He doesn't recognize Ukraine as a separate nation.
That's correct.
Yeah, so it's not really about them being democrat. They've been moving toward democracy for a long time. I think he invaded this year because because he thinks he can get away with it. So very quickly, 1 minute here. China just got back from the region. The people in Taiwan are very concerned about what happens in Ukraine. Do you agree that the outcome in Ukraine can influence what China does regarding Taiwan?
I do. I think China's looking at this very carefully, and the fact that it has seen, as a result of our leadership, 40 countries and more come together in a variety of ways to impose these massive costs on Russia for its aggression, that would have to factor into its calculus about Taiwan going forward.
Are you, as administration, committed to following Putin to the ends of the earth and supporting war crimes, investigations, and prosecution against him individually? Do you believe that we could ever forgive and forget when it comes to Putin? Do you believe it's the right policy for the international community to pursue him as a war criminal in perpetuity?
Senator, we're committed to doing everything we possibly can for as long as it takes to ensure that there's accountability for the crimes that have been committed.
That includes Putin himself.
Whoever committed the crimes, whoever ordered the crimes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We both went about 10 minutes. We will endeavor to encourage others to stick to about 7, but I appreciate your forbearance. I'm going to ask Senator Durbin, who's next, if he would both question and then preside if I have to run to vote during the next few minutes. You may uniquely among the cabinet be familiar with exactly how this all works. So thank you for your forbearance. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to make a point of being here today, Mr. Secretary, after I witnessed on television last night the exchange between you and the junior senator from Kentucky. I hope that no one left that hearing or believes today that his questioning represents the feeling of America. If Putin or the Russians or anyone take comfort in his questioning, they're making a mistake. I think it should be clear, and you tried to make it as clear as you could, that we are not conceding any sphere of influence to Vladimir Putin. We are not conceding an anxious effort to understand what he's doing in Ukraine. I understand what he's doing in Ukraine. It's very clear what he's doing. He has launched a vicious, barbaric, genocidal attack on this nation, unprovoked by them and unsustained by international law as we know it. And I did not want any friends and allies of the United States to think that the junior senator from Kentucky expresses our point of view. I cannot imagine the reverberations of that comment in the Baltics, for example. The Baltics were part of the Soviet Union because of the aggression of Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin. It had nothing to do with the people of those countries asking to be part of any Soviet Union. And they survived to this day as small, vibrant democracies loyal to the United States because they are part of NATO and they share our values. And we are not giving that up to Vladimir Putin under any circumstances. I hope what I've just said you agree with.
I do.
Good. Let me talk to you about a sentiment that has been expressed by Senators Moran and also by Senator Graham, and I share. And its sentiment is this: the earliest analysis of what would occur when the Russians invaded Ukraine suggested, and this is before the invasion, that Kyiv would last a matter of days, the bulk of the country a matter of weeks, but the resistance that would be formed against any Russian occupation could go on for months or years. And Putin would have learned under those circumstances that he had won a Pyrrhic victory, if he even wanted to call it that. The reality of the situation is much different. Kyiv has not fallen. You were able to visit that city with the Secretary of Defense. The bulk of Ukraine is at least stable, though there are terrible examples of fighting going on at this point. And my concern is this: we are trying to scramble in the last 53 days, is that correct? 54 days, to readjust our thinking about the future of Ukraine. We underestimated the courage and resiliency of the Ukrainian people, the determination they have shown to defend their own country. We perhaps overestimated the power of the Russian military. And as a consequence, we have to readjust to the fact that the Ukrainians have won significant victories. My concern, is expressed by my Republican colleagues, is this: are we throwing a 10-foot rope to someone drowning 20 foot offshore? Are we falling short of what they need for something decisive to happen in our interest and their interest? Are we doing enough from a diplomatic or military viewpoint, from your point of view? I would hate I'd hate to see the situation where we're saying how proud we are of NATO coming together with all its strength, and at the end of the day, a devastated Ukraine with refugees by the millions and people in unmarked graves is what's left behind by Putin. That's hardly a NATO victory. Would you comment on that?
Thank you, Senator. What Russia has done and continues to do to Ukraine every day, the brutalization of the country in the parts where Russia is engaged, is a tragedy that in and of itself can't be undone. People have died, been killed in the most awful ways. That can't be undone. People have been displaced from their homes. 5 million refugees, 7 million displaced persons inside of Ukraine, including, by most estimates, 3/4 of the children of the country have been displaced at one point. Some are moving back. And even if when they come home, that's not going to fully erase the trauma that they've been through. So some of the damage that's been done is quite literally irreparable. Having said that, I believe that we are, the United States, many other countries, coming together to make sure that, to the best of our ability, the Ukrainians have what is necessary to push back this Russian aggression. They've done that successfully in and around Kyiv. They are engaged now in a ferocious fight in southern and eastern Ukraine. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, Secretary Austin was just in Germany yesterday with 40 ministers of defense to make sure that we're all coming together to get the Ukrainians the kind of weaponry that they need in a battle that has changed in its nature to continue to do what they need to do to push back this Russian aggression. We are focused like a laser on that and on making sure that they have what they need. Some of that is coming from the United States. Some of it is coming from many other countries that are engaged, and it's being done in an organized and coordinated fashion. And it's being done in full consultation with the Ukrainians. But as I said, we have to continue to sustain that and follow through. Let me just cite one quick example, though, of how this has evolved. It used to be that when the president made a drawdown order, it might take some weeks between the time the order was given and the time the equipment in question got into the hands of those it was going to. This is now happening in many cases in as little as 72 hours, from the time the president did the drawdown to the time weapons are getting into the hands of Ukrainians to use them against the Russian aggression. 72 hours. We were just there, as you noted, and talked with all of the folks on the ground who are helping to make sure and coordinate the security assistance that's getting in to the Ukrainians. It's a remarkable operation, and it's working in real time. We have to keep that going, and we have to make sure that they are getting what they need to deal with the actual threats that they face.
The president has made it clear that a patch of Polish real estate is a tripwire. He said that over and over again. I assume there are other tripwires which you may not want to be as explicit with us in this committee setting in describing. I hope that they will include the consideration of the genocide which is taking place there as well. If there is a point beyond which we cannot, with a good moral conscience, justify or even look the other way or wait for a day to resolve it. On the question of war criminals, I was surprised to learn that current American law does not give us any criminal authority to prosecute those who committed war crimes in other countries, nor does it give us any civil authority over those same people. I have legislation to change that. We should make it clear to anyone that has been engaged in Putin's strategy, they will never find a comfortable, safe home in the United States. And I hope that I can bring that to your attention and that your people will take a look at it.
I look forward to looking at that, Senator. Thank you.
If I could mention two or three other things, Senator Haggerty, I'll wrap it up quickly because I know you probably are waiting to vote as well. Afghanistan, Mark Frericks. I wanted to make a point of making a record of our continuing concern about this Illinois resident who is being held captive in Afghanistan. Are you familiar with this situation?
I'm more than familiar with it. It's something that I've intensely focused on.
Thank you. We hope that we can bring him home. The Chinese bullying of Lithuania over their decision to recognize a Taiwanese office. Are you aware of this situation?
Again, more than aware of it, extremely focused on it. We jumped in very quickly when that happened to make sure that we could bolster Lithuania, including with economic assistance, creating greater opportunities for trade and investment. We've also rallied countries and partners in the European Union to do the same thing. The European Union has stood up against this kind of coercive action by China, the bullying that it's tried to use, and Lithuania has been extraordinary in its resilience and fortitude against it. But yes, very focused on that as well.
Is there a path forward in Haiti with the situation that we currently face?
It's a long path forward. There, as you know very well from the time you spent on this, there are two things that are going on. First, we need to see the government, civil society, all actors come together to get us to elections, free and fair elections, that reestablish a fully legitimate Haitian government and leadership. And that work is in progress. We're trying to facilitate that and support that. But having said that, the problems are so deep-rooted and so challenging that I think the road is very long. The criminality, violence, the lack of basic law and order is a fundamental problem that we're working to address, including by supporting and strengthening the Haitian National Police and getting other countries to do the same. That's very much a work in progress. The endemic poverty and lack of economic opportunity. One of the challenges, Senator, is that, you know, we and other countries over many years have devoted substantial resources to Haiti, but to date, the honest truth is that it has not made a sustainable difference. We have to be, and we are, looking at how can we do this more effectively to help Haiti get to a place where it is sustainable. And of course, it has been on the receiving end of one horrific thing after another, including natural disasters that continue to set back what progress is made. So the short answer is this is a long road. We're looking at and focused on trying to get the elections and having a government that can fully represent the people. We're trying to work on basic security by bolstering the police and dealing with the criminality, the gangs, which are terrorizing parts of the country. But then there is a much longer project in helping Haiti to really stand on its feet in a self-sustaining way.
Thank you. I'm going to send you a written question related to my efforts to secure the release of Philippine Senator Leila de Lima, one of the critics of the Duterte regime. I'd like to know your take on the current state of affairs there. I'll save that because I see Senator Hagerty waiting. I know he has to vote. So, Senator, please take it away.
Thank you, Senator Durbin. And Secretary Blinken, it's good to see you again. I appreciated our interaction yesterday at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee as we talked about the importance of the U.S.-Japan alliance, the Quad, the Indo-Pacific, and I look forward to continuing working with you on those issues. I'd like to turn my discussion with you today, though, on something else that's related to the region, but also it hits us right here at home. And that's China's refusal to stop the flow of fentanyl and its precursors into the Western Hemisphere. I've raised this issue with your assistant secretaries, with your deputy assistant secretaries, but I want to raise it with you today because it's that important. I feel like we need decisive action. It's for the safety of Americans. It's for the safety of our children. We're both parents. I'm sure you feel the same. Today in America, the #1 cause of death for young people between the age of 18 and 45 is drug overdose. 100,000 lives were lost last year to drug overdoses, and most of those drug overdoses were fentanyl related. And the DEA continues to assess that fentanyl coming from China into Mexico is the major cause of this. It's something that I talked about with Mexican officials last May when I traveled to Mexico. They talked about the fact that Chinese entities are sending technicians, they're sending equipment and setting up production in partnership with Mexican cartels there. And these cartels are multi-billion-dollar industries that have basically taken control of the northern border of Mexico. I met with your counterpart, Foreign Minister Ebrard, and asked him what we could do to cooperate, what we could do to help. And he told me that they would greatly appreciate help with things in the nature of scanning technologies, anything that would help them determine whether fentanyl or its precursors or the machinery to produce it was coming into his country. I appreciated his concern there, and I think it's something that we ought to continue to focus on. You know, I was on the phone with White House staff during the Buenos Aires G20 when President Trump directly asked President Xi to stop sending fentanyl to the United States. My sense is that we need to really double down on our pressure with China on this. If President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party can shut down a city the size of Shanghai, one of the 3 largest cities in the world, I think they could certainly shut down the flow of fentanyl and its precursors into our hemisphere. And I know you have many difficult conversations with your Chinese counterparts, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on what our strategy might be and encourage you to take on this difficult challenge too.
Senator, thank you for raising that. I very much share your concern. I appreciate your focus on it and the efforts you've been making. And I agree with you. This is a problem that needs intense focus and solutions. We've been working on this in a number of ways. We've been working to add some of the precursors to prohibited lists to make clear that you can't get fentanyl or variants in through the back door by using precursors that are, for one reason or another, not on prohibited lists. We've made some progress there. We are working with the Mexicans on exactly this question. We reestablished the security dialogue with them last year, and part of this is looking at of course, the flow of drugs of any kind into the country and what assistance do they need to more effectively police it. I'm going to follow up on the specific suggestion that you referenced to make sure that we are, if we haven't already done it, actually looking at that and doubling up back with them on what it is they need to effectively police fentanyl. I can tell you this has come up in engagements between President Biden and President Xi, so it's been raised to that level as well. But I'd also welcome working with you and your team on ways that we can effectively address this problem.
I appreciate that very much. And again, in my conversations with Foreign Minister Bard, that may have predated what you've been talking about, but he sincerely believed that there were technology solutions that we could help provide that would help them. I've seen some of those technology solutions deployed at our southern border. I went to our southern border earlier this month to see what's happening there. It's a tragedy in terms of the flow of narcotics coming across the border. But again, I saw the technology that we're putting in place now that can sense in a very sophisticated manner the illegal substances that, at least where they may be hidden. So I appreciate any efforts that you might make to work on that. I also wanted to take on for just a moment longer the topic of India and our U.S.-India relations. The world's oldest democracy, of course, is the United States, but India is the world's biggest democracy. And I think they have, I think what I see before us is something I'm certain that is very frustrating in the short term when we have our differences, and you deal with that every day. But in the long term, the strategic partnership that we have with India, I think, poses the opportunity to do more good in the 21st century and have more consequence and more impact than anything that the CCP could do, coming from their perspective. And I believe that there's great untapped potential there in terms of developing that partnership for the good of all. And I would look forward to hearing your views in terms of what concrete steps the United States and India could take together to deepen our strategic alliance.
Senator, I very much share your perspective. I think this partnership has the potential to be one of the most important and foundational partnerships that we have going forward over the next decades. This has actually been, I think, a success story over multiple administrations, going back to the end of the Clinton administration through the Bush administration, particularly with the Peaceful Nuclear Cooperation Agreement that, by the way, now President, then Senator Biden helped shepherd through this institution, through the Trump administration as well, and prior to that, the Obama administration, and now through ours. President Biden has spent a lot of time directly engaged with Prime Minister Modi and India's leadership. Of course, as you know very well, we have energized the Quad that brings India together with Australia and Japan and us. This has been a very important vehicle for strengthening our collaboration across a whole variety of fronts with India. I've spent a lot of time with my Indian counterpart and very much agree with you. What's interesting, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday in the Foreign Relations Committee, is this is a moment of, I think, strategic inflection, by which I mean this. A number of countries are now relooking at some of their relationships and some of their interests, particularly when it comes to their relationships with Russia. And of course, in the case of India, there's a relationship that goes back decades. And Russia for India was, out of necessity, a partner of choice when we were not in a position to be a partner. Now we are, and we are investing in that effort. I think there is a growing strategic convergence between the United States and India, and of course, China is a big part of that. But I very much share your perspective, and this is a major area of focus for the administration and for me to make sure that we are doing everything we can to strengthen and to build on that partnership going forward.
I appreciate that very much, Mr. Secretary, and I would just add one more point of encouragement. In my recent trip to Japan, I spoke with Prime Minister Abe, who developed a very good relationship with Prime Minister Modi. And I know you know Prime Minister Abe as well, and I would encourage you, as you talk with your Japanese counterparts, to engage them in finding good ways to work together with India, because they seem to be on the same track and the same mindset as we are. Thank you very much for your comments today.
Thanks,
Appreciate your testimony.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me start by congratulating you on assuming the chairmanship of the subcommittee, first hearing, and look forward to working with you and the ranking member. And I also want to commend the chairman of the full committee, Senator Leahy, as others have done, for his incredible service. Mr. Secretary, good to see you. We had a chance to talk yesterday in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, so I'm not going to retread that ground. But I do want to circle back on the sanctions issue, because I think you and the President, the Secretary of Defense, the whole team have done a really
good job in accelerating now the deployment of weapons and also isolating Russia to the extent we can at the UN and other places, and moving forward on sanctions. But as the sanctions go on, sustaining them is going to be key, and expanding them is going to be key. And leakage in the sanctions only helps Putin. And there are countries that right now and other entities that are violating the sanctions. As you indicated yesterday when I asked, we have not applied any secondary sanctions so far. I think we've got to use the secondary sanctions authority the administration has, including against countries and entities in countries that are not simply maintaining their current or pre-war imports of Russian oil and gas and other commodities, but have increased it. And I would just urge you to do it because I think you're going to see growing movement for mandatory sanctions in the Senate and the House if you don't use the existing authorities that you've got within the administration. I just want to make that really clear. Let me say something about the Czech Republic, and you and I and others just came from a beautiful memorial service to Secretary Albright. Of course, she and her family came to the United States from then Czechoslovakia when I think she was about 11 years old. I had a meeting with the Czech foreign minister yesterday, and he indicated that they were willing and wanting to provide some of their Soviet-era helicopters, Mi-24s, to Ukraine, but wanted sort of a swift agreement for us to replace those with Vipers, and if not new Vipers, with some of the Vipers out of our inventory now. So I just want to encourage you to move forward on that as fast as possible.
And Senator, just on that, the Defense Department is looking at that right now.
Yeah.
This is something that I think is very important across the board, which is a number of allies and partners have provided weapons from their stocks to the Ukrainians. In some cases, that leaves a void that, understandably, they want to fill. One of the things that we'll be coming forward with in the supplemental are funds to help provide additional foreign military financing to partners and allies. That is one vehicle by which they can make up any of the systems that they've shared with the Ukrainians that leave a void with them. At the same time, of course, we're looking at what we have on hand. The Pentagon is focused on this particular case as well as a number of others.
Great. No, I appreciate that. No, I know you're trying to overturn every stone, but anything we can do to accelerate that effort. Of course, something else Secretary Albright was very involved in was trying to stop the bloodshed and atrocities in the Balkans at the time. And I also had a chance to meet with the Foreign Minister of Bosnia-Herzegovina yesterday. And I think Senator Shaheen raised this issue, and I just want to underscore it. I think we're worried about what will happen in November when, as I understand the process, the UN Security Council has to continue to authorize the presence of international forces, and if Putin exercises that sanction, that veto, it's a real problem. I know it's on your radar screen. I think I'm pleased to see the actions the United States has taken with respect to DODIC in the IRS. I hope we'll encourage our European allies to work in that direction. As you said yesterday, to try to accelerate the integration of Bosnia-Herzegovina into the European family. A couple other issues. Senator Menendez raised yesterday the fact that Turkey had now essentially convicted Osman Kavala to a life sentence. Clearly a political prosecution, no legitimate basis for it. The administration did make a sort of, a tepid statement, showing unhappiness. But this combined with the fact that Turkey is continuing to move forward in their effort to ban the main Kurdish party in Turkey from participating in the elections, seems to me something that the administration really needs to press hard on. In the case of the HDP, you've got just last Tuesday, April 19th, You know, they were challenging it in the court, this effort to ban them, but Turkey's top court accepted an indictment filed by the prosecutor seeking closure of the HDP. I mean, this is just a blatant disregard for any standards of democracy. And so I just hope we'll be very strong on it. And obviously, we have a complicated relationship with Turkey. There are lots of pieces. But this, something you've been involved in for years, trying to support our allies, the Syrian Kurds. You know, Turkey continues to try to take them out whenever they can. So I think we have a lot of work to do on that front. Let me just close by asking you about, you know, the president's pledge during the campaign, and I think you emphasized again when you were asked last October about the consulate in Jerusalem to establish, you know, a greater, reestablish that consulate for our relations with the Palestinians. Can you give us an update on where that stands?
We are committed to reopening the consulate in Jerusalem for the Palestinians. It's something that we are working on with the Israeli government. I was in Ramallah just a few weeks ago and saw President Abbas. We talked about that, among other things. As you know, we reestablished support for the Palestinians a year ago, January, including significant humanitarian and economic assistance that had been previously held back. We have reengaged them across the board, and the consulate is a piece of that. It does, of course, require coordination with and support from Israel, including, for example, providing privileges and immunities for the staff of the consulate to be. So it's a work in progress, but it's something that we continue to work on.
Thank you. I appreciate your efforts, and thank you for going through a whole lot of issues very quickly. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got to go vote, I think.
Thank you. And Mr. Secretary, it's my understanding we have no other members seeking recognition. If I might, I just had 2 or 3 quick questions on some very specific programs that Senator Graham and I have worked together on over a number of years, both to get them authorized in law and then to fund them. I have a lot of other questions I'd be happy to ask, but we both have other things we need to get to. The Global Fragility Act, as you know, one of the things that Secretary Albright contributed to was the development of Plan Colombia. And the whole concept of a coordinated plan between diplomacy, development, and security came out of Plan Colombia. Senator Graham and I worked over several Congresses to ultimately get the Global Fragility Act signed into law. I'd welcome a chance to talk in more detail about the selection process, the path forward, the strategy to prevent conflict and promote stability. I'd be interested just in hearing briefly now from you a timeline for the development of implementation plans. And the requests for funding were very modest relative to the scale of the problems. We have many other areas where we have requests that outstrip the budget of this committee. I'd just be interested in your view on the timeline for implementing these strategies and what we might be able to do together to improve the focus and investment in this area.
Mr. Chairman, the timeline for implementation is now because just a few weeks ago, the President signed off on our proposed focus, including the countries in question that we would focus on. And so this is something that we're moving out on and very much welcome working with you on as we move forward and actually implementing it. But it's right on the front burner.
Thank you. The Development Finance Corporation, I'm planning to have a hearing with Scott Nathan, the CEO, to discuss their fiscal request, but I just wanted your view of their performance to date and their role in supporting the administration's priorities. Senator Graham asked about China. There's a number of other members that see its significant potential, whether it's in climate resiliency and combating climate change, whether it's in the West Bank or in developing better opportunities for economic development that might promote stability in other areas. What's your view of how they've performed?
And I'm sorry, could you just repeat the last part of that?
Well, the Development Finance Corporation has a potentially very broad range of areas of activity. Each senator has their own view as to whether it should be principally countering China or dealing with climate or working in the Middle East, in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or elsewhere. I'd just be interested in your overall view as to whether they've achieved the potential that the act that created the Development Finance Corporation imagined for it.
Thank you. First, I'm a very strong supporter of the DFC. I think it's a very important and powerful tool, one that I appreciate, and it gives us the ability to do a number of things. One of the things it gives us the ability to do is to more effectively offer an affirmative, positive alternative to China's development programs, including Belt and Road. We can make this a race to the top, not a race to the bottom, including by using DFC, not only, of course, with its own resources, but the fact that it has the ability to leverage significant private sector resources. And so that's one area of focus for me, is making sure that we use this effectively as a way of actually advancing concrete projects that are, again, attractive and affirmative, and don't bring with them, for example, many of the burdens that we see countries take on when they are, for example, working with China. Debt, workers brought from China to actually build the projects instead of using local workers, no respect for the environment, for worker rights, corruption, et cetera. But we needed the tools to do that. The DFC is one of them. We also have to make sure, and this is an area of real focus, that we have, and the DFC can be engaged in viable projects. So the money may be there. We've got to make sure that the projects are there and in a way that really brings the private sector in. So we're very focused on that. It also joins up with a couple of things. It joins up with Build Back Better World, which I think is a very important initiative that the President's undertaken, again, to make sure that in critical areas, including energy and climate, health, and technology, we are investing in, engaged in projects that will be a race to the top for the countries that are that we're doing them with. And DFC is one of the tools that we can bring to bear on making Build Back Better World effective. We've been identifying projects in different parts of the world that make sense. I think we'll be moving out on a number of them shortly. Now, having said that, I think we need to look at ways to maximize the potential of DFC. I'm not convinced that we've gotten to that point yet. So we have a lot of focus on it. I actually, by statute, chair the board. The Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources, Brian McKeon, is intimately involved with DFC and working on that on a regular basis. I'd welcome actually sharing ideas with you about how we can use it even more effectively going forward.
Thank you. As of right now, the way that the equity provisions of it are scored is causing me some agita. I respect and understand the concerns of long-standing staff on the Appropriations Committee about the secondary or follow-on consequences it might have if we were to change the treatment of the DFC Equity Authority. But I think we are underutilizing a very powerful tool. And I would welcome interacting with you and with my other colleagues on this committee and the administration on how we can make sure that the DFC and Build Back Better World Fund together are allowing us to really combat China's pernicious influence. In my first 6 years here as chair of the Africa subcommittee, I saw it in country after country, all over the continent. I was with former President Sirleaf of Liberia last night and was reminded of my very first conversation with her a dozen years ago now, where she was asking for U.S. help rebuilding the Mount Coffee Dam that had been destroyed in their civil war. And after several meetings, she basically said, well, I guess the United States doesn't do this anymore. We'll have to take Chinese funding. Ultimately, our partners in Europe were able to provide funding for the restoration of that critical source of clean energy and stability for Liberia. But there are dozens of countries around the world that would rather work with the United States than work with China if we can just provide them with a source of funding. And I think DFC could be a critical part of the answer to that solution.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think one of the things that we really have to work on with DFC and other vehicles is the speed with which we're able to engage on things, because exactly what you described, I've heard again and again, that the process across different agencies, I'm not just talking about DFC, is slow, laborious. Now, we have to do the right due diligence. That's vital. But I think there are ways to make what we do more efficient, quicker, more responsive to needs. And I agree with you that DFC is can be a major part of that, so we should work on making it work even more effectively.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your testimony before the subcommittee today. I think the conflict in Ukraine, Russia's completely unjustified and unacceptable brutality against the civilians of Ukraine, its attempt to rebuild the Russian Empire, and the ways in which it is shaking the very foundations of peace in Europe, the rules-based international order, is the most pressing issue of the day. I'm grateful that you and Secretary Austin have taken the initiative to engage with our allies, to deploy resources, to travel to Kyiv personally, and to testify before this committee today when you've just returned at a moment when it is so critical that we continue to work in close partnership to show the impact of American diplomacy and to show the impact of the resources that we can and should provide to support our critical NATO allies, to support the Ukrainian people and their resistance, and to meet the pressing humanitarian needs of all impacted by this conflict. Questions for the record will remain open. They need to be submitted, by 5 p.m. Tuesday, May 3rd. So the hearing record will remain open until that point. And again, Mr. Secretary, thank you for your testimony.